thank you everyone for joining us for the Jupyter Hub Town Hall. I myself, Dax and Stace will be speaking, but we also have folks in the audience, Chris Wingard from OSU and Terry from Axiom that can also answer questions. I will let Dax and Stace introduce themselves at their parts. What I did want to do is just spend a little time introducing Jupyter Hub. Our Jupyter Hub runs on OOI servers, which means you have access to a large number of CPU and memory, creating a cloud-like environment. And as need increases, we can also add to that environment. The nice thing about this is it has access to both our processed science data and our raw data files, eliminating the need to download. So in the past, if you found you needed more files, you had to go to our front end and bring those files down. Here you would just be able to add them into your Jupyter Hub access part. Jupyter Hub, if you're not familiar with it, does support over 40 languages. I think the two most important ones being Python and MATLAB. But if you prefer Java or R or Julia, it also supports those. And what I like is this helps democratize our data access and processing requirements. So anybody with an internet connection can get to our Jupyter Hub environment and use it. So if you have a lower power equipment, no equipment, that helps in the access. And as OOI continues to collect data, our data sets are only going to get bigger. We're about 8 years into our 30-year collection. So this will become more and more important, even with some of the maybe less complicated data sets. The processing power is still going to be growing and larger, and at some point exceed what our usual laptop can do. One thing I want to stress is we are looking to build a community. We want users to use this. We want users to share notebooks when appropriate or processing ideas and concepts. This is something that we feel is important, and we'll look towards you to kind of guide us on how we can best help that and make that happen. How do you get to it? First, you do need to register an email address with OOI first, and you can use our help desk. Our help desk is on OOINet. It's also on our main web page. We do use CI login service, so you can use your institution's login. Just remember to use that email as the registered email, and the URL is as listed here. In the future, on this landing page that you can see here, you will see a link to generate an email to request access. You'll also see a link to help. And then I say here in the future, we'll have a link to Jupyter Hub on the Data Explorer, but it actually is there now. It was released yesterday. So when you go into Data Explorer, you will be able to get to Jupyter Hub. I think the best way to see it is through some demos. And I think I would like to now hand this over to Dax. I will stop sharing, and he will be our first demo.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I think that the my background using this Jupyter type environment really starts with a cloud computing environment that I built with a collaborator, Tim Crone. Actually, I would say that Tim Crone built with his collaborator, Dax Soule. But it has fundamentally changed the way that I use data with students and use data with student researchers, because it addresses some of the most intractable problems when it comes to working with large data sets and a large population. So I'm going to share my screen. When you have your account set up, and you've gone through all of that process, your landing page is going to look something like this, and you're going to have an opportunity. You're going to see that you've got a Jupyter Hub icon right here. You've got a home page button right here. And then you've got this really big button right in the middle that says Start My Server. And when you hit that button, what is going to happen is that the computer is going to give you a lot of options, right? And those options involve everything from a relatively small computational environment. So you can see that the standard launching selected computer is one CPU guaranteed with a maximum of 4 CPUs for distributed computing problems. You've got 1 RAM guaranteed, 4 gigs of maximum. But depending on what you're doing, you have the ability to choose a medium server, a large server, or an extra large server. You also have the ability to launch this system in MATLAB, in medium and standard. So the choice of computational structure is pretty diverse. Let's go ahead and kick the tires on an extra large server, and I'm going to hit start right here. And essentially what this is doing is it's firing up my computer in my built environment in the cloud, right? And it's starting, and what you're going to see should be a Jupyter Lab control panel. Give it just a moment. It's thinking. And here we go. And I'm going to go ahead, and if it's okay, I'm going to make this just a tad smaller. There we go. We can actually see this a little bit better now. All right. So what you can see here, is this still visible to everybody, I think?
You're good.
Yes.
Okay, so what you can see here is that I've got a file structure that's kind of listed over here. And when you are given your Jupyter Hub environment, the only thing that's going to be over here in the file structure is a folder called OOI. I have added folders called repos, and then I've added another folder called my data. And this is kind of where how I organize my files, but this is something that's completely customizable to your needs. In the OOI data folder, you have a number of different files, and the file that we're going to be working with is kdata. And in kdata, you're essentially working with a directory that has all the OOI observations that are available. It's the gold copy. You're basically sitting right on top of all of the data, right? Over here in this environment, you have the ability to create Jupyter notebooks. And you can see that I've got a notebook here that I've kind of started. But let's say, for instance, we wanted to start a brand new notebook. We would hit this nice blue button and we would launch. And this would bring us to a page that would give us the ability to launch a standard kernel. So this is a Python 3 kernel. You could launch in Bash, you could launch in Julia, or you can launch in R. All of these environments are pre-built and part of the OOI Jupyter Lab structure. You can see that I have several other environments, OOI, OOI1, OOI2, and OOI5. These are environments that I've built for myself that have different packages that I think are important to students. And this combination of Jupyter environment sitting next to the data is a huge deal, right? And if we think about the way we work with data and the way we work with students, the reason that it's such a big deal is, number one, it makes computation available. Almost anybody working with students is going to have to face a variety of challenges with regards to computational environments. And the first one is getting everybody on the same page, right? By having a computer in the cloud, you have the ability to have everybody build the same computational environment, whatever that environment is. If you're working in MATLAB, that's great. If you're working in Python, that's great. But essentially, you have the ability to create a common environment that the people that are in your collaborative group are working in and have the ability to share information, steps, techniques, everything like that. The second big thing is that this system only requires that we have access to the internet. That's it. It doesn't matter if your collaborators are working on PCs, they have Macs, they have their brother's computer that's 7 years old and completely outdated. You have only access to the dilapidated machines that are in your school lab. none of that makes any difference, because the only thing that they need is a web browser that is powerful enough to let them look at CNN or check their email. And that is enough to put them, and I'm going to demonstrate this in a second, into a computational environment that literally can crunch through millions of data points with no problem at all. This computational environment is built with JupyterLab, which could be the topic of its own talk. It's a very rich, dynamic system that has the ability. If you look here, I've got different types of code blocks. You can see that OOI Jupyter Hub Town Hall, this is one code block. And you have the ability to, as you build your processes, you can choose to either have blocks that are markdown, and in a markdown block, you have the ability to produce rich text and documentation and explanation, and a very interactive way that lets you change fonts and put bullet points and add figures if you need to describe what it is that you're doing, and share with both your students and with the results. It has the ability to add code blocks. So I've added a cell right here, and this is a code cell. And in that cell, we have the ability to execute any number of either Python, MATLAB, or Julia or R commands. Having this available basically deals with one of the most intractable problems of dealing with students, in that you have to decide, if you're working in an environment that has locked doors, you have to decide who gets the key and who doesn't. With the OOI Jupyter Lab environment, you have the ability to work with any student anywhere, and the only thing that you have to be able to do is get them an account and get them set up, right? Okay. So my next big point was that it's flexible. I think we've already covered that fairly well. We've got Python, MATLAB, R, Julia, all available within this environment. The next big point that I would make is that this is extremely customizable. Whether you're working in any of these different languages, you have the ability to build environments that utilize almost any tool that you can imagine that you want, right? Anything that you can do in Python or do in MATLAB or do in Julia, you can set up to run in this code environment. Here I've got an image, and this is also a good example of what we can do in a markdown environment, but this is an image that I found on the internet that basically shows the different types of computational tools that are available. Everything from Dask, which allows for parallel computing, to Pandas, which essentially gives a rich spreadsheet and computational interface, Xarray, a tool for using multi-dimensional data, to things that are focused on how you present the data. HVplot, HoloViews, Data Shader all provide rich interactive ways to take a data result and then plot it. The other thing that this allows you to do is you have the ability to utilize GitHub to interact with the greater data science community. In this environment, you have the ability to launch a terminal window that will allow you to clone and download directories and code that have been produced by any number of people that are working both in Python and big data, and who are specifically working in the OOI environment. Just for purposes of this, I went ahead and put in links to some of my very favorite GitHub repositories. Mine is up top, but the truth is some of the ones that are below there are probably more valuable. People like Jake Vanderplatz, Ryan Abernathy, Rich Signell, Tim Crone, and Rob Patlin have all done an amazing job of developing code that you can easily import, that's publicly available, that is intended for your use, that you can pull into this environment and make things work, right? Okay, so with that, I want to very briefly go through an example workflow. So here, what we want to do is demonstrate the power of not having to download data, because that's the other big thing that is critical in the utility of this system. Because no matter what you're working on, if it's in OOI data, the one thing that you got to be able to do is get the data into your computational environment. And some of these data sets are absolutely massive. We've got video data sets that are approaching half petabyte at this point, right? We've got other data sets that are in the gigabyte range, in the tens of gigabyte range. Moving that data around and finding a place to put it where you can put it in a computational environment is quite a challenge. So what this does is it allows us to go ahead and tell the computer that we want to build a computational environment. This computational environment is going to build using, I'm going to start with Xarray. I'm going to use Pandas, and then I've got a couple of different packages here that are intended to help me display the data. So I'm going to load those packages, and you can see right here in this corner, we have a little black dot. That black dot is important to watch because it tells you whether the computer is still doing work or it's done. So in this case, the little black dot went from solid to not solid, and that means that this cell that I executed is now done with its stuff. You can see right here we've got a memory bar, and you can watch this memory bar evolve as we kind of work through this problem. Right now, I'm using 500 megabits of 132,000 or so that are available. So that's the 132 gigs that we launched it with. And we're going to define a couple of variables. So in this case, I'm going to tell it that the eventual data set that I want you to see is going to be resampled by the hour instead of its original sample rate. And we are going to pull our data from, this is the bot PT instrument that is in the, I think the eastern side of the caldera at axial seamount. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm defining a file path. And we can see this here. I've gone to my OOI Kdata folder, and essentially I need to find data that's associated with this I'm going to go Control V, Control Command C. We're looking for data that's associated with that instrument, right? So hang on, that didn't work. We're going to go ahead and just type it in. So we are RS 03 ECAL. So by using the search bar, we've now kind of worked our way down to where we are finding these instruments. And let's go MJ03E. Let's go ahead and get a little bit more specific. And 06. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to blow this up so we can see. Here are all the data files that are associated with the instrument that I'm interested in. And in this case, we have the ability to look at the heat sensor that's on that bottom pressure instrument. We've got the ability to look at any number of other parameters. But what I am interested in is the bottom pressure measurements that come in this 15-second sample directory. So I'm going to basically get this file path, and I'm going to define it, and I'm going to use Xarray to open this file. So in this case, I'm going to hit enter, and here we go. So we are the file path. I'm so sorry. I never loaded my file path. Here we go. We're going to load that. And so here we are. You can see the memory bar is chewing along. We've used 760 megabytes. Now we're up over a gigabyte. We have a cell that's going. The elapsed time was 11 seconds, and boom, it is done. And in that 11 seconds, using only a gigabyte of memory, we managed to load, let's count these. That's 2,000, that's 92,000. This is 14 million data points that we loaded in 11 seconds. And if we take these data points, we can take a look that we have a lot of things that have been pulled in. So we've got these 14 million individual samples. Well, we've got a number of different parameters that have been pulled out of that file that are associated with this data structure. For each of these individual samples, we've got a data point that's associated with all sorts of parameters in that data. I'm only interested in the bottom pressure. So I'm going to use Pandas, which is a spreadsheet type of a utility. And I'm going to pull all of these into, hang on, I think, oh, I'm hitting the wrong button. Shift, boom. I'm going to pull all of these into a data frame, and we're going to see what that looks like. So here we are. We managed to do that in not a lot of time. And now we've essentially taken all of that data and we've put it indexed by time with the measurement that we're interested in basically a 2-column function. If we'd been interested in more data, we could have built out those columns across the screen and had the ability to do any number of computational things. This gives us the ability to next use this functionality to create a picture. And you can see that I've already kind of printed this up. This would take a couple minutes if I did this, but if we do this in HV plot, we have, hang on, I think my screen is no longer in an optimal shape. I'm going to move this chat window away, and I'm going to refresh this image so that it gets to the right size. And so that's bottom pressure from 2015 to 2021. And I think that we utilized just a little bit of computational power. So I think with that's pretty much what I wanted to show. Jeff, do we have time for questions during this part of the conversation? We've got a tidy group, so I think we can be kind of informal.
Yeah, I think we can do questions as we go.
And Ian has asked a question in the Q&A, Ian Black. And his question is, sensor drift is an issue for some of the bio-optical sensors. Will the OOI Jupyter Hub host pre and post deployment calibrations for sensors like the ACS and SUNA or SUNA?
So Chris, I think this is actually a question for you.
At this time, I don't believe that is planned. That would be a separate kind of data set that would have to be built up and added. But it's definitely something that could be put forward as a request and then fed up, I think, to Jeff and the PMO, Program Management Office.
Yeah, I would echo that. Those are the types of ideas that I think we need to hear about.
Fabulous. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, then I'm going to pass the baton. I think that Stace is going to take us on a walk through a different side of the data portal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dax.
Thanks, Dax. Hi, can everyone hear me? It's Stace.
Yes.
Hi. Let's see. Oh, great. And Darlene, were there any more questions from our last presentation?
No, we're all set. Thank you,
Okay,
Stace.
great. Hi, I'm Stace. I'm seeing you today from Woods Hole. I am a senior research specialist at Woods Hole Oceanographic, and I'm in the biology department, but I also work on the data team for the coastal and global scale nodes team. And so I'm here to share a second example, and I want to thank Jeff and Dax for this opportunity. I do want to say I have not used Jupyter Hub as extensively as Dax has. I feel I have just dipped my toes into this resource, and I'm also not as proficient with the Python programming language, so I'm going to be demonstrating today a notebook that was created by one of my students. So we're going to see how this goes today, right?
Stace, if I may interrupt, I missed
Oh.
some questions, so it might be better to have Dax answer those before we continue with you. My apologies.
Oh, okay, great. I will go back to mute and let Dax come on.
So there are a couple of questions here that I think are for me to answer for sure. The first question was, can you create your own environments? And that's what I was actually showing when I showed you the OOI1, OOI2. Those are private. Those are my private YAML files that create the computational environment that I like to use and have all the packages that I use. You can create any you can build any environment that you need to for your purposes. All you've got to do is build your own YAML file and then install the button in the console so that you can have the drop down and create that environment, right? what is the computational backend? Is this a Linux cluster or cloud research? I think that this is a Chris Wingert question.
Actually, it's a Craig. I could tell you it's a Linux virtual machine cluster. Craig, do you want to put in any detail on that? I think you should be able to unmute yourself, hopefully.
Is Craig here? I haven't seen him yet.
He was.
I don't see him in there.
He was earlier. But yeah, it's a Linux backend, all virtual servers.
All right. All right. So the next one is more of an infra question. Is the OI Jupyter Hub backend backed by public cloud or private cloud? I think this is again
Private.
Private. All right. And then Rebecca asks, can we share the email address to register for an account? I think we can absolutely do that. And then Chia says, does the notebook need to reside in Kdata? No, you can. In fact, you can't write anything into Kdata. You have to create your own directory structure and then point to the whatever pathway of the data that you're interested in, and that could be Kdata or it could be one of the other data directories that Stace is about to show.
And actually, Dax, just to add in there, anything below that OOI directory, that is read only. You will not be able to do anything below that directory level other than read the files.
Right. And so the at least and one of the things that I didn't spend a lot of time on is the way that I build my directory structure. But essentially, I've got the OOI directory that's read only that I can't touch. And then I have a couple of other directories that are focused on either data that I've created, right? So files that I wanted to share, save, and be able to re-ingest. Let's say, for instance, I'm building something from 8 years of bot PT data, and it takes me 7 or 8 minutes to crunch through and actually create the data file that I want to be able to manipulate. Well, one strategy that you can use is to do that process, export to a text file, and then re-ingest at a much faster pace in another program that just does what you want it to do, right? But you have to put that someplace else. This is not an OI specific question, but what does it take to build your own Jupyter Hub? Let's say for my own lab. All right, so that is definitely a whole different topic, and it's possible that Greg could point you to resources to do that. I think that a great place to start is looking at the Pangeo organization that is specifically built around disseminating the structure for this type of computational environment. I think
so. I can add to that. This is our third iteration. So we tried to do it a little bit more simply with what they call small. I think they called it Small Hub, but ultimately we went with a container with the bigger one, just because it gave us a much more robust environment. But it really, I think the question you have to ask yourself is, how many users do you think you're going to serve, and how big is your environment? But Dax is right. There's a lot of great resources out there for this. You could also contact me, Craig, through our help desk, and we can help out.
Yeah, and I think that another thing to look at is potentially a thing called QHub, and I think that's got a kind of a step-by-step way to build your own cluster.
Yep.
So finally, is the only way to share code through this through Git push or an online repo? Well, I think that that's probably the best way to share code. But in a pinch, I'll download something and put it in Slack for a student if time is an issue and I've lost my ability to describe exactly how to get there. Sometimes I'll take a shortcut, and there are lots of other ways to share code. All right.
And if there are any other questions, please don't hesitate. We'll do everything we can to answer them.
I'm going to mute myself.
Thanks. I think I might be showing some people some of these shortcuts, as Dax was alluding to. as I mentioned, I am just dipping my toes into this environment. So consider me a new user of this type of resource. But I had similar motivations to Dax. So I wanted to be able to share the same computing environment with my student. And I also did not want to have to download files. And to explain that, to really demonstrate that, I'll start sharing screen. Go to this screen. Okay. What you actually should be seeing here is a link to the raw data, OOI's raw data repository. And what you're seeing here is I've dived into one of the folders for the autonomous underwater vehicles that were deployed at the Coastal Pioneer Array. And you see one of the files here that I wanted to work with a student is 348 megabytes, right? So my student, Taina Sanchez, and you'll see her GitHub in a moment, Taina wanted to work with all of the AUV transects from this location. So it made sense to try out the Jupyter Hub. So I'm going to show you in the oh, I wasn't supposed to show you the, oh, let's go back to the launch page. Great. So Dax was demonstrating that he used the KData folder in his example. In this new example, I'm going to use data from the raw data repository. And in this case, I'll use the uncabled folder, which will let me navigate into, and I'll try this actually. I'll go in, I'll find my reference designator for the mobile assets. And since I know these so well at this point, I can actually drill down right to that particular netcdf file. This is how we found the path in the Jupyter Hub to each of the AUV netcdf files that we wanted to use. If I head back up into the main folder, you'll note there are other folders here that you may be interested in. For example, Dax mentioned imagery data from the RCA, or Regional Cabled Array, and those are located here for you. But today, I want to show you what we did with the AUV data. So once our student Taina found the path, she created a notebook. And so what I'm going to do for you here is I'm just going to show you that Taina's notebook is available on GitHub, in this case, a public GitHub. And what I did for today is I literally just downloaded the notebook. So I didn't do any terminal like Dax was talking about cloning the repo. I just grabbed the notebook. And by the way, just to show what I wanted to do for you today is reproduce the output of this notebook, which is a nice set of plots. So I grabbed the notebook and I'll show you my files. So my files do not look as tidy as Dax's did, right? So you'll see there's a bunch of named notebooks and then a couple of untitled notebooks where I'm just using this kind of testing the waters, right? I'm using it like a sandbox. And so for Taina's notebook, if we go in, I showed you this already. So I did run this right before the call just in case. And because again, I'm not as proficient with Python as this student in this case. So what I'll do right now is I'm going to clear the kernel and clear all the outputs. Restart. Yes, okay. Great. So I should mention that I'm using just the standard size server, so the small size server, and it only has the 4 gigabytes listed up here. So I didn't have to use the big one like Dax was doing. But something different is happening right here in the first cell. In this case, since we're just testing this situation, we didn't even know you could create your own environment. So we found that the default environment didn't include a couple of the packages that we needed to run our workflow. So we just do an installation here kind of locally in our notebook. So what this means is when I come back to my Jupyter Hub tomorrow, I will still have to run this cell to install these packages and then import the packages. And then the next step, just like Dax did, we are loading the particular data file. In this case, this is Taina went in and we found the path to each of the netcdf files. And then obviously we can run this again for all of the other transects that we're interested in. I thought about Dax, I thought about typing the word data set here just to show the variables, but I'm afraid to do something new in a live demo. So I'm just gonna click go. And I know that it's loaded because the number has, it changes from an asterisk to a number. And then because I'm just not changing any of the code here, I'm going to actually run all the cells remaining. So I'm going to go run selected cell and below. And my hope is that this will now pull the variables that Taina was interested in and make the plots, just as we saw in her rendered GitHub notebook. So I'm clicking go. Looking up here, I'm not using as much memory as Dax's example was using, but yet, this is still something that I would want to do in this data proximate computing environment and not have to worry about whether I have everything set up right on my own laptop. And it does take a little bit of time to run the 3-panel plot because these files are quite large. I mean, gosh, the AUVs collect data at 24 Hertz, right? But yeah, so I am so thankful in a live demo this worked, and I'm showing the 3 panels just as Taina plotted and showed here. And then to prove it even further, back to her notebook, Taina included the link to the visualization for this AUV deployment in our Data Explorer. So if I open that link, and I can go to the Data Explorer, and you can see this is how one might find out about the AUV data, right? And in fact, just to help you a little further, it does provide the initial path here on the landing page in Data Explorer. And I thought just to end and bring us back to Jeff, I'm going to go to the home page of Data Explorer, and earlier today I saw the Jupyter Hub button right here. So
just reload. It's your screen is in memory. It's cached.
okay, that's because it's so new. My hope is that when this opens, we'll see a nice brand new Jupyter Hub button that will help you get started. That's the live demo. But I will stop sharing because I'm guessing that for those of you out there with a fresh Chrome, you'll see it. I probably just have a cached version from earlier today.
Yeah, it took me once to refresh, and it did come in.
Stace, there are a couple of questions in the Q&A.
Oh, thanks. Let me try to find the Q&A.
I can read them to you if you want. Is there a catalog function like intake or other way to find the path to the data, or an online URL that we can browse through the data?
So in the case of what I was showing data from the raw data archive. Data in the raw data archive are in many basically different formats and such. So it does require a bit of knowledge about how those data are organized and such. So there's not an easy, essentially I needed to learn the pathway from the reference designator for that particular asset. And then I climbed through the folder structure to find the exact deployment that I wanted for, in this case, the mobile asset was one of the AUVs. So I don't think there's a easy dictionary for the raw data archive, but that said, for using the K data, I believe it's quite a bit easier from Dax's example.
I could probably add to that. I would admit that our raw data server, it's just an Apache server. It's not necessarily the easiest to use because a lot of the file names are instrument specific. But for next project year, we do have a project on the books to try to make that easier, to try to put a catalog or at the very least tags on top of it to make it a little bit more user-friendly and searchable.
For the K data directory, that K data directory is what's used to generate the threads catalog that is available online. And so you can browse that through a web interface. And I can drop a link here in the chat to that. There you can go and basically you can see how the directory structure kind of maps from there to what's in K data. And so that's
Okay,
Nope.
well, I would like to thank everybody who joined for listening and participating and all of your good questions. And should you have further questions, please feel free to reach out and we will get back to you. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the panelists as well for participating. Have a great rest of the week.